are my friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Professional Hippies. If you're joining us for the first time, or maybe you tuned in a couple episodes and have the opportunity to listen to some of the experts we like to bring on, today is no exception to that. We have a guest that we're excited to revisit, catch up with again. James Davis is coming from Bay Staters for Creative Wellbeing. I believe the last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, but the last time you were on, it was Bay Staters for Natural Medicine. You mentioned right before we went live, a little bit of a rebranding, but this is so cool because when you talk about having someone on that is really spearheading or co-creating in a way a decentralized push for drug policy reform. There's so many of us that have personal convictions on what direction policy should go. I don't envy the position of a lawmaker, anything to do with touching legislation, but something has to change. If you're tuning in this program, we're the Professional Hippies that we like to talk about everything professional, woo-woo, somewhere in the middle, and try and bring on people that we can have intellectual conversations somewhere in the middle of that, right? Balancing all those nuanced perspectives. And I can't think of someone better than James to come on, because at this point, you know, James will be able to tell you, but you guys are in quite a few cities, right? So there's growing pains that come with that. There's putting people in positions, empowering folks. And so at a really big level and a very local level, I think James is going to be able to bring a lot of insight to this conversation and just where we're at today. So, hey, James, thanks for coming back on. Excited to catch up with you, see what's changed since we last spoke and what's happening with you today. So how you doing, buddy?
Doing great, and thank you so much for having me on and all the amazing podcasts you all are putting out to help educate people. And for me, drug policy is going to make or break the next century of the United States. Going into this year, the opioid crisis has devastated millions of people's lives. It still is. We still have loved ones that are struggling. We have a heart disease epidemic in which people are addicted to food, something that is very much a drug, but is not talked about like it's a drug. And in the midst of this, we have some pretty transformative tools at our disposal, and one of them is psychedelics. And so for me, I grew up in a neighborhood where the war on drugs was on our doorstep. I saw a meth lab explode when I was just about 5 years old. It's one of my first memories, because when you ban drugs, it does not stop people from doing them. It simply shifts all of the profit and all of the supply chains underground, where very vicious and psychopathic people and a lot of desperate people who are just part of the drug economy still produce the amphetamines, the tryptamines, the opioids that people are so often using to medicate trauma, and other times using because they want to. And so I helped start Bay Staters for Creative Wellbeing, which is a community organization that teaches people how to grow mushrooms of all varieties, both the legal kind, and if they're not listening to us, they'll also grow some of the magic kind. And we also decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms and help educate the public at large about how they can be used safely and responsibly for everything from weaning ourselves off of harmful substances to starting a new career to reevaluating our relationship to others, to ourselves, and everything in between. And so we definitely consider ourselves professional hippies from just about every background and every ideological creed, every class, every type of person has been part of this movement. And so far in 10 cities, we have taken the boot off people's neck. They can grow and share psilocybin mushrooms and a few other naturally occurring psychedelics. And we're really aiming at the jugular of the drug war as we go into this new administration from the bottom up. We need to educate people, and we need to be strategic and creative about how we do it.
I love the way you frame that, from the bottom up, right? Because I think it's really easy to play victim, especially in the echo chambers. That like politics infiltrates everything. Right? I feel like the older we get, the more we pay attention to it. Dylan and I love riffing about it, but at the end of the day, policy changes really come from the bottom. You know, the policymakers will go where the votes are and where popular opinion exists. And I think that's one of the really cool things that you guys are doing is to educate and inform first and foremost. So 10 cities you guys are in now, huh?
Yeah, 10 cities across 3 states, and we're always open to mentoring and helping nurture new leaders, even if that means just helping them host a really kick ass event to get people talking about mushrooms and not just psychedelics. Really, mushrooms and mycology, the study of mushrooms, is going to revolutionize the way that we build the modern world. It already is. It is revolutionizing our diets because they're incredibly healthy alternatives to a lot of the foods we're eating today. And so, if this interests anyone at all, I hope that we can stay in touch and we can build something together. Because, like you said, Colton, politics touches every part of our lives. It's, touching our lives if we're in North Carolina and our home has been flooded. Right, Dylan? It is touches our lives if we are walking down the street and cars are speeding. And so I think what's really important is educating your neighbor, getting to know your neighbor, getting to know other cool people who share the same interests as you, so that you're not only less lonely and less nihilistic about the world, you can actually change your world. And the example I'd lead us off with is you know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone in India and Ukraine and every country on earth. We are a mycelium, a network unto ourselves as humanity. And your small acts of kindness, your small acts of mentorship are really some of the strongest politics you have at your disposal. Uh, sure, you could run for local office or you can write your lawmaker, do that too. And yet, people who are elected, they end up having to answer to a lot of interest groups or a lot of powerful people within government in order to implement policy. And so, like you said, Colton, almost every major achievement that has actually moved the needle in American history has been people demanding their rights and people working together in solidarity. And that triggers a reaction from the political establishment of that day. And so I would just say if you're not a political person, that's okay. That's all right too. But be a good person. Be someone who wants to change the world just how you influence other people and the people around you.
It sounds like too when you're talking about exactly what you're sharing too as well of it sounds like you're an accelerator almost for the natural plant medicine world, right? Like it sounds like we forgot about it, but everyone remembered how to grow tomatoes and cucumbers and onions. But what about this other side? They wanted you pharmaceutical wanted you to forget about it. Well, hey, now we got to bring it up, right? When you talked about coming from the bottom up, it really sounds like you're creating an economy and showing like, hey, there's an economy in this, there's an industry here. And if we can show that and grow it up from here, not only can we build an industry from it, but we can show it to the politicians. Hey, there's a benefit here, not only for health, there's a benefit for tax dollars, there's a benefit for whatever it is, for the local communities, whatever it might be. Can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of people forget, especially when we talk about professional hippies, it's not just being a hippie and going and taking, enjoying whatever you want, and having a good time. Like there's a community and an industry that can be built here that everyone can benefit off of, even if you're not actually consuming the product yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some very bad news for you, Dylan, and then I have some amazing news. So you got to stick around for the amazing news. So the bad news, in a sense, is I actually don't think there is much profit to be made in psilocybin mushrooms. If you are an investor, if you are someone who is entrepreneurial, you can create a tremendous amount of value around this space. And I'm happy to get into the details on how we're doing that, how we're helping other people do that. And yet, it's not going to get you the return that investing in the S&P 500 in an index fund is going to. I really wouldn't quit your job or bet on these psychedelic stocks because they haven't paid off for people. And a lot of those companies that are promising this as the next big thing are really overlooking some market fundamentals. And so
Have you told Tim Ferriss that? I just want to make sure.
I'm trying. We recently were featured in USA Today, and it was a deep dive on how the mushroom industry really isn't going to be the same type of industry as cannabis or these other substances, because at a fundamental level, mushrooms are not something that people do all the time. They're not something that people get incredibly dependent on. I'm sure there's exceptions to the norm once in a while, but the average person uses a few grams of mushrooms once in their life, maybe twice. And oftentimes people are getting mushrooms from a close friend or someone they know. And let's say that they don't even get it as a gift, which is a beautiful way to experience it. It adds to the energy of the process. It can kind of make the healing experience of a psychedelic that more special. Even if they choose to buy it, the average price per gram in some parts of California is 50 cents. And so let's round up. Let's say you're
Do you
paying.
know specifically what part of California? Maybe an address or a name or... No, I'm just kidding.
That's
50 cents
confidential,
a gram,
Colton.
huh?
But I'm always happy to connect people. How about that?
I'm kidding.
But even on the higher end, you might be paying $10 or $15. I don't know what Dylan's charging you, man. But on on the higher end, let's say you're getting just kind of ripped off. You're paying $20 per gram of mushrooms and you're using 3 grams your entire life. That's $60 in revenue, not counting the costs that are obviously part of that equation. The cost being, how do you meet a customer? If you opened up a retail space, they're going to tax the living Jesus out of you. They're going to regulate you. They're going to try to get you to test your psilocybin, even though it's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. The psilocybin content declines very rapidly. And so because of these factors, it's just unlikely it's going to be profitable as a retail product. One last thing I'd say is if you get a grow bag and you just grow some mushrooms at home, you will end up with way more than you ever personally need. Sometimes 80 to 150 grams of dried mushrooms. I'm doing that every day. Just kidding. But that's what it's all about, right? That's a lot of mushrooms, and that's something that you can get from a very inexpensive bag online at a time when the spores themselves are also legal, as long as you promise they're for microscopy. And we obviously know a lot of people are not using them for microscopy. They're using them to grow mushrooms. And so I don't think that from a retail perspective, there's going to be this massive profit to be made. And many drugs follow this general trajectory. Cannabis, something that people do use every day. It's used in much higher quantities. And yet even the price per gram of cannabis has been dropping precipitously.
It's just totally imploded. The market's just really gone in on itself.
Yep. And again, if you know the right guy who's just grown a few plants in his backyard, it's great quality cannabis. It's special, and he has way too much of it. So if you know the right person, if you're growing a few plants for yourself, you end up with way more than you ever personally need. And frankly, the cannabis industry has not respected its workers. It has not respected its investors. They allow a lot of moldy product to drip through. Some dispensaries are great. Some entrepreneurs are really creating value and creating community. They're creating a customized educational experience for their clients. A lot of them are not. A lot of them just got in on this boom that this was legal. This was going to be a moneymaker, and they didn't really care about creating value for people. And so a lot of these multi-state operators, unfortunately, they didn't do it right. And so I think we have the chance to do it right with mushrooms, which is the good news you were waiting for, Dylan.
Well,
Yeah.
to take that, go ahead, Dylan.
No, you Colton.
Well, I just want to take that a step further because I want to kind of poke your brain there a little bit, James, on I tend to totally agree. Now living in Denver and having friends in the industry, being privy to how the industry's kind of cannibalized itself. You have kind of two tiers that or two strata of clients, so to speak, where some people are just looking for the best deal all the time, and other folks are maybe aficionados, right? They're the sommeliers of cannabis, and they want to know, the breakdown of everything and get the best of the best, etc. Right? But the value ladder existing around that seems to be pretty empty, right? You have these multi-state operators that expect the product itself to carry the weight of the brand. But if you have someone that's not brand loyal, looking for the best deal day in, day out, happy hour style coming in for 15% off on a sale that's already happening, you're not going to establish a lot of brand loyalty. So I'm curious, not specifically to the cannabis industry, but where you see kind of that value existing in the periphery of the psychedelic industry, and especially with regulation. So almost a two-part question, right? Like, where do you see the economics for someone that maybe isn't wanting to quit their day job, but maybe they do want to quit their day job, right? Maybe they're not looking for a 100x return as an investor. And then you kind of have this battle with policy, right? Where you have some folks that are like, well, they need to go through 500 hours of top tier regulated training and be a fucking EMT to make sure if someone's vomiting blood on a trip, they can administer an IV in their ass. And you have other people that are like, well, kumbaya, the mushrooms can do whatever, and I'm just going to sit there and hang out with them. So kind of chew on that however you like, but I'm just kind of curious where you see that value existing in the periphery of the psychedelic industry.
You're really cutting straight to the chase, and especially with the EMT certification, right up the rectum too. I think the main place where we can create value, and this is going to be true of a post AI economy, is by being human and for being there for people. And a lot of people who are amazing coders, who are amazing consulting professionals, they are going to be out of a job soon. And it's really painful for us to think about what that's going to be like if we don't recreate a social contract where we're really there for each other. Because the care industry, even just checking in on your friends, taking care of a loved one, taking care of yourself so that you don't become a mental health nightmare for the rest of the world. These are things that create trillions of dollars in value for our economy, but we don't put a price tag on them. And so I would say the biggest area where people can get a side income in this emerging space is by educating people and just by being a loyal, being a down-to-earth person who knows the benefits of psychedelics and also the tremendous harms that psychedelics can have. People do die by taking too much MDMA. People can be manipulated on this stuff. It's, I think that everyone or almost everyone can have a comfortable experience. Even some people who are on the schizoaffective disorder, even some people who are bipolar can greatly benefit from psychedelics. Yet people can also be in a state of mind where it's just not a productive experience, or they're expecting it to be this panacea that solves their relationship problems or suddenly makes them land the job of their dreams. And that's just not what mushrooms do. Mushrooms are something that lifts our serotonin level and allows us to see the world in a new way. And it is so different for everyone. It can be different on the same batch of mushrooms, same person, different day, very different experience. So this is something that is also highly variable. And so we need to have people who just care about the other person. They're not there to force an agenda on them during a trip sitting experience. They're not there to pressure them into doing it. They're just there to be someone who that person can be tethered to reality. So if they start to feel anxious, they have someone to talk to. They have someone who's a warm and comforting energy. And to go back to this point that the experiences are so varied, and your wonderful points, Colton, about how a lot of cannabis businesses expect the product to sell itself. The main variable that will affect a psychedelic experience and a cannabis experience is your mindset. That's probably true of alcohol as well. I mean, having wine with your boss is not the same thing as having wine with your girlfriend, right? Smoking, you know, smoking a doobie in your dream rotation is not the same as smoking a doobie by yourself, listening to rock music. These are all very different experiences that we can customize once we know our own minds. And so a lot of people have a extremely negative cannabis experience or extremely negative psychedelic experiences because they've been primed to believe that they would have a terrible experience. You think of the kid that tries pot at a party in high school, freaks out because the DARE program told him he was never going to be able to see straight again. And unfortunately, some people, their first experience is taking a dose that is just uncomfortably high. They take way too many mushrooms at a party and they don't have a good time. Or I've even met people who have had psychedelics and someone is injured in their family. They get a phone call that someone they love has been in a car accident. Imagine how terrible that would be on mushrooms, or if you were really high, or if you were really drunk. And so I think that the main value we can create is by educating people and by being there for them. And thankfully, the bar to do that is pretty low. I don't think you need these really expensive training programs they're marketing on people in Denver. And now that it's been legalized in Colorado, I mean, mushrooms in Denver, since they were decriminalized in 2018, and frankly, long before then, have effectively been decriminalized. And especially if you're not the Pablo Escobar of mushrooms, selling them by the pound, there's not a lot holding you back from making a website as a coach or as a mentor and networking and meeting people that want to have that type of experience. And that's what people are doing. They can try to regulate that. I think that we need to regulate ourselves. I think we need to have really high standards. And thankfully, if we have more transparency, if more people are educated, then weirdos or people who are just not in it to help people, they'll hopefully be weeded out. People who are overcharging others, they'll be weeded out by the market if people are able to talk about this stuff without looking behind their back or worrying that they're being sold something that's not what people say it is. The more transparency that we create online, in person, through community is really going to benefit those services and their quality. You can try to regulate them, but if you make it too expensive, you're not getting higher quality trip sitters necessarily. You're just getting people who can pay $8,000 to $10,000 for the licensing. That doesn't make you better at trip sitting for people. So generally, that's my philosophy. Is we're going to see this grassroots education keep continuing if people are willing to talk about it. And I hope they talk about it. That's one of the most beautiful things you can do for another person. And if something is helping you, if your diet change, if your lifestyle change is benefiting you, love your family enough to tell them about it. Just love them enough to give them advice. And that makes a huge difference.
What's stopping us from having mushroom lounges, like hookah lounges? You just go to a big place and they got little rooms that you can go rent it out for 3 or 4 hours, put whatever songs you want on. Here's a chill spot. Oh, and by the way, here's like a clean product offering it to you. Like what's stopping a business like that, these days? That would be awesome.
Great question. So I'd say logistically, a lot of times people pick up the energy of the people around them. So the space that they choose is just so personal and so important. I would love to see a place like that where people would feel comfortable just going and taking a microdose with each other, hanging out, or smoking cannabis, or doing nothing at all, just there to meet people and have a good time, maybe drink a kombucha, whatever
Have a
floats.
lobby, maybe individual rooms, like it's a hangout area, you know?
They had that in a smart shop. I think that's what they call them in Amsterdam when I went to buy truffles. And the woman was educating me and kind of bring me through the different varieties available. It was a beautiful smart shop. I mean, like, just picture kind of a smoke shop right on the river and had big bay windows and cool tapestries and like a couch set up and stuff. And she was like, if you want to just eat them and go right over there, you could. I was like, the traffic coming in off the street, I think I'm going to take these back with me. She's like, yeah, I get it. But people do. They just hang out right there and, eat some coffee cakes and trip by the water. So.
And spot on. I mean, we're looking at two different visions where there might be value of just having that communal space with, individual private spaces within it where you can chill out. And then, a lot of people just want to take them home, where they want to take them up to the mountains. And our organization, in mentoring people, we've mentored about 2,000 plus people, meaning we've either trip sat for them, or we have helped them have an introductory call where they can ask any question under the sun about psychedelics, and we're there to give them good advice. Sometimes that's
just psychedelics, though. Like, if they're looking for general life advice, maybe we don't do that. Or
we do that too. I mean, I think it's the relationship you have with the person, right? If you have a good thing going with them and they want to talk about their job, they want to talk about their relationships, I'm here for it, And a lot of our facilitators, the people that we've trained and welcome to be part of our network, who will refer people to, they are in the business of wanting to help people beyond just mushrooms. However, if someone really just wants to experience them on their own terms and in their own cognitive way, very supportive of that as well. I'd say that that's probably about a third of people who give them a try, is they just want to see how it feels. Another third, they have some thing that's holding them back, whether we call it depression, rumination cycles about themselves, about others. There's a lot of people in pain who just want to have this alternative and see if it works for them. And so we really run the gamut of people. And to bring it back, all of them are unique in where they want to have the experience. We've trip sat outside by the river. We had Boston Globe tag along with us and covered experiences where we've done microdose hikes in the woods with people, or just laid by the river in these nature reservations. So we really take a laissez-faire education approach. Is like, where are you feeling this? Where do you want to have this that would be special?
James is like, oh, you're here for that. Well, if you actually right over there, grab these big windows next to now,
James, go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, you talk about too how some people you try to weed out the people, right, that are getting into the industry for the wrong reasons that you were talking about, and you have a lot of people that come to you for those types of consultations or like wanting to find things out. And since y'all are kind of the forerunners on from the ground up on creating a foundation for this, right? Do you have people that come along that y'all have to kind of like, oh, you're here for something else, or like, I see what you're trying to figure out, but this isn't, like you said, this isn't a moneymaker thing. How do you handle those situations, or do you say like, here, take this, you'll figure it out? What is your kind of process on that?
Great question. So with our facilitator network, we have people apply if they want to be part of our network, and we give them a safety exam. So you have to go through open book test and just study. Open, no, because I think I just want people to learn that information, right? That there are risks, that they should be cautious, that it's always better to educate people that this does have drawbacks. There are people, for example, who were about 80 years old who had underlying heart conditions, and they have passed away on psilocybin. I can't actually say that their death was was necessarily bad. Like, I don't know enough about those exact situations. There's a lot of people who are on their deathbed who benefit a tremendous amount from psilocybin, but we're here to give the harm reduction advice that you can always start with a little bit of it, because some people, get a lot out of just taking a small amount, and you can always take more. You can never take less, right? So they pass this exam. It's a pretty long exam. They also have to share why they care about this. They have to answer questions about compassionate and active listening. They have to, kind of tell us what their view is of how we're connected and how, all beings, on animals, the trees, are connected. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy there, because we don't want to inadvertently platform people that have some just extreme anti-life ideology. We want people who just generally think that nature is our mother, that we can benefit from this alternative. At least some people can, and that we should be responsible mentors in doing that. And so, honestly, a lot of people, when you're doing community organizing, when you're in your career, even, I feel like a lot of people show themselves the door. Sometimes I I respond to people slowly, like as an individual. When they reach out to me, if they want a trip sitter, I give it a little space at the beginning of that relationship to see how things will go. I'm not in a rush to get back to them. I'm not in a rush for them to get back to me, because I think that you can weed out and find red flags in people if you're just perceptive about it. If they're like really in a rush to do something, or they're very manic about something, or they're needlessly aggressive about something, then you can kind of energetically see that you're probably not the right person for them. And that's kind of the approach that we teach too, is as a trip sitter, you're probably not a good fit for 99% of people. You just might not vibe with it. The vibes might be off. And you could still answer really helpful questions for them, but maybe they choose to do it with their friend Stan. Great. Stan was probably the better man for that. And so I think that just energetically telling people and teaching people and inculcating that we're not here to save everybody. We actually want you to have a good relationship with this person. We want you to enjoy being their trip sitter, because you can actually get a lot of inspiration yourself with the right person. I learned from people I mentor a lot, and it's really special. And it's something that they want to give life advice. They want to share that and share what they're learning too. So I think energetically, a lot of people show themselves the door. They show themselves that they're not consistent with values in one way or another, and you don't let that relationship fester if they're not a good connection.
That almost deserves a pregnant pause, because I think that's so accurate. That there's Dylan, I know Dylan can attest to this. When you have someone that's hyper fixated, God forbid they went through a breakup, a layoff, interpersonal family conflict, and they're like, this is the thing that's been back here, and I got to do it now, right? And lo and behold, it's a myriad of other life changes as well, but they just think that, hey, maybe this is the silver bullet, this is the easy answer. And on the other side of that, though, one of the things I was curious about, if this resonates with you, because asking in the form of a question, but I just feel strongly that education in general will immediately relax someone's nervous system, whether they decide to proceed or not. And that's the nuance that gets lost in the psychedelic conversation, is that 6 degrees of separation, right? Just how you mentioned earlier, like, someone that knows someone that knows someone that's in Ukraine or India. That same effect, that butterfly effect, takes place with our policies, our legislation, our reform. And so whether or not someone wants to personally partake, if they can see that this is not dangerous for their friends and family, colleague, etc., just that general perception shift, there's been so many people that have come in the orbit in conversations with me that will leave that going like, hey, that's awesome. Like, it's not for me, but that's really cool. And having that dynamic shift, whether it's before leading someone through a trip or not, I think that I agree with you. I mean, that's the most important part of it, is just giving people the information to decipher themselves, right? Taking the biases off of, what dare's done to us, or the war on drugs and propaganda, and just saying like, hey, here's some facts. You objectively come to your own decisions there, right? Your own opinions, because I can't even tell you how many times people were bugged out, and it's like, hey, before we even get to the tough stuff of, digging in there and just giving you a sunset on your own life, let's do some education, so when you are in that trip, that's your shit, man. Like, the mushrooms, you took 2 grams of mushrooms, that's not going to kill you. Like, you're good. Okay. That's your shit being projected out there. Like, now you're just in an arena to work on it. I think that takes a lot of the ill will and kind of the anxiety out of the equation.
Spot on, brother. And, sometimes I feel like the main people who will seek out a guide, they're usually, to stereotype, they're usually a little older. They're usually over age 50. A lot of them have read Michael Pollan's book. They're kind of hearing about this. They're exploring it as an alternative. And a lot of times in my case, they want to persuade their wives that they're not crazy for wanting to try it. And so it's really about them getting educated so they can tell their significant other that they're going to be okay, that this is something that they really want to do and it's going to be safe. And that validation, and responsible containers for it, knowing how much to take, knowing what you're getting yourself into, knowing that you can feel a lot of anxiety, even on an amazing trip. You can still feel some very profound emotions about death, about yourself, about mistakes you've made. It's critically important. And to connect it back to that political, Colton, to build on your thought, there is a study by UC Berkeley that shows the number one thing that leads people to support policy change for psychedelics is simply knowing someone who has benefited, just hearing their story. And on the flip side, when you see these referendums, which are being forced by groups that want to make training very expensive, that want to make the startup costs very expensive, that's their game. That's how they're making money off of this.
Is that something you're seeing a lot? Sorry to interject there, but I mean, you might be a bit more on the pulse of that. Like, there's interest groups that, whether they have nefarious intentions or not, like, that seems like that's a guiding point, or that seems like that's kind of an undercurrent, is creating a barrier to entry.
I think the undercurrent is that 5 years ago, psychedelics were seen as a hot investment. There were people saying, look, we're waking up to this. We're going to make money off of it. And I don't even necessarily think that was like an evil or something to malign instinct. That's just kind of where the zeitgeist was. A lot of people in Silicon Valley, have benefited from psychedelics. So they thought, how do we set this up to be a business? And there's really not a lot of things you can do to make money off of this unless you put a bunch of barriers around it. And they're honestly selling very expensive training programs, very expensive licenses to people in Oregon and Colorado. And a lot of those entrepreneurs are sometimes $1 million in the hole, and their Oregon facilitation center shuts down because there's not a lot of demand.
So you're speaking to, just to clarify that a little bit, you're speaking a little bit to what we saw roll out with like the cannabis playbook, right?
And it's actually the same super PAC, New Approach PAC. I like to name them. I don't name the people in it. They treat it as a career. But they've created a bunch of artificial barriers to entry in the cannabis industry and in psychedelics. And in Oregon, they did the same. And the care is like almost $2,000 for a few grams of mushrooms.
Are they responsible for lobbying for these changes?
Yeah. And what they do
Okay.
is they convince people that these ballot questions or these laws, most people are not going to read their 30-page law that they're trying to push through. They're just going to hear psychedelics. That sounds good. I like psychedelics. That sounds like it can help people. But they're tricky about it. They force language into those bills that is really destructive for the psychedelic ecosystem and for those entrepreneurs. And what happened in Oregon is slightly over 50% of voters were like, yeah, okay, we'll legalize it in a medical context. It sounds like it's good. It sounds like it'll help people. And since then, demand didn't shoot up because a lot of the people who were going to try mushrooms were going to try them regardless of what the state law said about it. A lot of people don't even know mushrooms are illegal. A lot of people don't even know what they are at all. They don't consider them a drug. I've stood outside of grocery stores where I've had ladies say, "Oh, I hate the taste of mushrooms," and they'll walk away all angry. I'm like, all right.
Keep those portobellos illegal. I don't like them anyway.
It is a good. They do taste horrible sometimes.
It's all about how you prepare them.
That's
It's
true.
all about preparation.
There's the rebuttal. Hell yeah.
And so,
well, too, along with that as well, what is you're talking about this too? How they this pack out there, how they're doing it, right? What are because it all also comes down to your politicians, your state legislators that are going to approve things, right? So obviously, what you're doing and working with your state legislators is different than how they're doing it out there, and it might not. You don't have 30-pack things laws, right? But it's more it sounds like it's way more acceptable in your region. It might be acceptable out there, but it's not comfortably acceptable, right? Like your region, everyone's like growing into it. It's not a profitable thing. We're here to try things and grow. Whereas there, it's like money, money, money. What else can we do to grow profit to grow this? Like it's interesting to hear, like both of y'all are doing it two different ways, but then it all comes down to your legislators. How are you convincing them differently? It's interesting to see that.
yeah, absolutely. So we saw the tension of this spill over in Massachusetts over the last year, 2 years, really, because that same pack that had passed this law that was still unfolding in Oregon is still unfolding in Colorado in a very expensive way. In a way, I suspect a lot of people in Colorado are going to straight up ignore if they are a trip sitter, if they like mushrooms. They already are ignoring. They tried to create these artificial barriers. And so they swooped into Massachusetts about 2 years ago. They knew that we had decriminalized 6 cities. Now we're at 8. And they basically pretended like they wanted to work with us. They were extremely dishonest. And they forced a law on the ballot in front of Massachusetts voters that was almost 30, 40 pages long that sounded good. But what they end up doing is they get so defensive about their law that the way they talk about it is they're like every commercial where they'd have like an actor say that psychedelics were good for them, which is what you should be doing. You should just be saying psychedelics are helpful. Even if you're pushing a bad law, like that's pretty useful. But they would always couch it as like, this is for the veterans. This is veterans. And it's like, yeah, well, yeah, it's for veterans. It can help veterans, but it can help every type of person. And then at the end of the commercial, they'd say, not for retail sale. And it's like you're just bringing and feeding into a lot of these defensive heuristics that are making people kind of more sketched out and scared of this. Whereas our grassroots strategy, working city by city, has just been like, we're going to talk about the benefits, we're going to be honest about the risks, and we're going to get the right type of people. It only takes a small handful of people who really care to go to their city council meeting to speak about why this has helped them personally. And we're going to get a ton of great media where people are sharing their stories. And then we're going to let society work it out. We're going to let society be educated and kickstart those conversations. And we ended up having to oppose the ballot question because it was so poorly written. We pulled out every single stop we could to try to change it legally, but they spent $7.5 million.
I
And
remember seeing you opposing it, and I remember seeing that, and I was like, "That's interesting." And now I understand now what was
yeah,
going on. Okay.
and when you're against a political action committee that is spending a lot of money, there that doesn't make them like good at politics. That doesn't make them good at communicating with people. Um, it lost 43%. Only 43% of voters voted for it. I think a lot of them, if they had known more about it, would have not voted for it, who are supportive of psychedelics. That's a very low margin compared to Colorado and Oregon. And also, if you compare that to cannabis, we clearly made an impact in educating about the finer details of this law, which is where the devil is in the details, whether or not you can actually facilitate and hold space for people, or whether it costs you $10K a year, 2,000 per facilitator to operate. It matters a lot. And we had gone through every single step in which they could have worked with us. They could have given reassurances that that's not what they were trying to do, that they were trying to do it the right way. And they didn't. And so for us, it was a really fascinating time because we're just trying to educate, almost want to depoliticize this because it ended up getting a lot of negative attention to mushrooms. I actually would say that ballot question, all in all, definitely stalled progress in our state because suddenly a bunch of people who are opposed to it were never going to support it anyway, but don't really care if other people are doing mushrooms. They're not like in the streets, like angry with signs, like, I can't believe Colton did a few grams. They don't even know what a few grams are. They don't know anything about it. But you're asking grandma and grandpa to go vote on DMT, and they're like, that sounds scary. Whereas our approach was like, no, let's just build from the people we know, build from, and they're not conventionally hippie people. They're not conventionally liberal people. They're all sorts of different types of people of every age group and every demographic that do mushrooms, and need to educate their friends and family about it. And that divisiveness of like, you have to vote for or against this piece of paper, combined with some of the defensive rhetoric and also just some of the dishonest things about mushrooms that the opponents brought out, I don't think it left us better off. And so the bigger piece of advice is money cannot buy the human spirit. Money cannot persuade people. It might persuade some politicians. It talks, it has power. But I think one of the biggest forms of power over us is it makes us feel like we're helpless or that we can't make a difference. But we, a all volunteer group, beat $7.5 million. And it was a tough decision, right? Because the heuristic is, well, something's better than nothing. Something's better than nothing. We always got to do something. You always got to vote Team Blue, right? Because at least, I disagree with everything they're doing, but they're slightly better in a shade than the other guy. That thinking has destroyed our country.
Well, your foundation too of what you were talking about earlier when I asked about how do you weed out people, right? And you would say, well, people come in and they want to rush things. I mean, what you said, them coming over to your area and rushing, they're literally like, we got to get this out, and it's like, well, why are y'all doing that? There's no reason for that. Why are y'all all of a sudden spending $7.4 million to try to get a vote out in your area? You had already educated people on that to be like, hey, what we teach to try to weed that out is exactly what they're doing. Unfortunately, it's for what it's kind of sounds like we're on the same side, but we're not. This is a bad egg coming into the picture, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting exactly how that worked out. And then for you, and it sounds like too, your demographic is, like you said, kind of a little bit more older in that region, but also like they look into things a little bit more instead of in, let's say Colorado and Oregon, they understand their demographics like quick. We need to move things along, right? And so with that, you understood your demographic market, but it's awesome that what you've built won over on somebody trying to come in and be a bad egg in that situation.
Yeah. And another thing I'd emphasize too is I don't think everyone associated with that is a bad person. I don't pass like
Yeah.
a bunch of moral judgment on them. There were a few people who were extremely dishonest, and I could feel energetically what it was about. And a lot of people felt that energy too, but they kept going along with it because they felt like it was their only option. Right. There were so many people who I think are good people who still were just fell into this heuristic that it's now or never.
Do they have a lot of younger people? Like they're new into it, they're gun ho, this is the way and only the way type of situation.
Well, yes. So I'll tie this back to kind of what happened with the FDA's recent rejection of MDMA, right? That's the headline. FDA rejects MDMA.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. There's a company that is funded by billionaires, funded by venture capital, says it's a nonprofit, but it's actually a nonprofit mixed with a for-profit model. So that's kind of misleading. And they were standing to get a 6 to 12-year authorization from FDA to be the only legal purveyor of MDMA treatments in the United States. And so they were going to charge upwards of $25,000 for an MDMA dose. That's what people are paying out.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. 25 grand for all.
Good nonprofit right there.
Yeah,
That's a nonprofit.
the devil would be pleased.
And, it's just a lot of people, I think, that believe psychedelics will change the world, that their psychedelic experiences have been transformative, and they just latch on to these things because they're so hopeful and they want to see change. They want to see progress made in this area. And so it's just really tempting. And people don't look into the details of federal administrative law on these things. They're just like, MDMA, like, let's go. So just be mindful of that. And I think the best thing you can do is let us or team up with one of your local psychedelic societies, just a ragtag group of people who care, and have an event in your living room, have an event in your backyard, put up some posters in your neighborhood that just look good. Canva has gotten so nice. You don't have to be smart to make something look good on Canva.
Don't show up like West Baptist Church. We could do that, right? Like, drugs are bad. Take the mushrooms. Really see God.
All sobers go to hell. We could just start picketing against sober people.
To be honest, like a lot of our rhetoric throughout these local campaigns have kind of been that drugs are bad. Like a lot of drugs are pretty harmful for people's lives in context.
Quite a few of them. Yeah.
Quite a few of them. I still think that they should be legal. I think that if we moved toward legalizing, say, like poppy, I think you can actually grow poppy in the United States. You have to fact check me. But
oh yeah,
coca leaves, which are used to make cocaine. People who are addicted to cocaine might use coca to kind of wean off of cocaine if they have a problem. Like if you legalize the most natural version of these substances, it's usually safer. But you also, I don't think we should really go around encouraging people to do coca. I don't think we should create a multi-billion-dollar industry that lives or dies based on how many people get addicted to coca or get addicted to cannabis.
Could you imagine right on Wall Street, they have trees, but it's cocoa trees. So you're about to go to your next meeting. You just rip a leaf off, pop it in like a Zen. Our economy would boom.
The tough part is, though, I mean, it's like what you were speaking to, James, is like I'm guilty of being in that camp too, of seeing what happened with the medical playbook with cannabis, and once that foot was through the door, it seemed like it relaxed a lot of tension with lawmakers, and they're like, okay, they were a bit more subservient to seeing the impact of medicinal marijuana and going, okay, it can't be that bad for recreational. But I think what people forget is like this is similar and completely different at the same time. right? It really is kind of like, I get it. After being at the MAPS convention in Denver a couple of years ago, seeing the different factions within a community that's all love, sunshine, and rainbows, and let's change the world. You got the indigenous community that is fighting to say like, hey, this is part of our culture. Let's respect where it came from and honor this way. And then you got the hippies that are like, hey, let's just completely decriminalize everything and we just got it wrong in 1970. We didn't have to put it in the water. We just got to put it in the food. And then you got people in the middle that, like the super PACs, if they're spending 7.5 million, I'm just hard pressed to believe that a substantial amount of that came from a grassroots movement, Bernie Sanders style, of people donating $5 a head to get to 7.5 million. I mean, it just putting on my rational cap, I would be led to believe that someone would have, or a few people would have a very staked interest in, if a law was to pass, there's a way to recoup that investment plus, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like all of this tension and progress is in the middle of this, of this trampoline being pulled taut, right? And so it's also just kind of difficult to say like, hey, when we look back in 5, 10, 20 years, who was right? Who
Right.
got it right? Did we make any progress? Is this still going to be in this pseudo gray market, decriminalized? Because you're right. Like in Denver, we were at a show this past weekend. The cops didn't give a shit about checking people for nothing but guns.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as you weren't, um, a health hazard to yourself or anyone else, they were cool.
Yeah.
Completely different energy. And
Yeah.
so, I have a lot of respect and admiration for you guys being willing to make that tough call. I'm curious, what that looked like, having an internal discussion. Did you spearhead that discussion within your own community and say like, hey, this is how I feel, but it's going to be kind of a communal decision here? Or was it, what did that look like when you have, you're trying to kind of make a proclamation for an organization that's made up of volunteers?
Yeah, great question. So I guess the first thing I'd say is there's really just no monolithic community for anything. I would say that there is many different types of indigenous people, for example. For centuries, a lot of these people were at war with each other. Many of them did not use psychedelic substances, some of them did. And so always be skeptical of someone who is claiming to speak on behalf of any major group of people. Because I think if you're honest, you can speak for the people around you. You can speak maybe for your tribe. You can maybe speak for the people in your neighborhood. But even that's a little problematic because at the end of the day, we have seen this word community weaponized in a lot of ways to say, like, we are the LGBTQ community. Well, what does that really mean? That's a bajillion different people, all with very different lived experiences who might agree on a few core foundational values, right? And so I think that one thing that is so dominated that psychedelic advocacy space, if you want to call it that, or community, is this idea that everyone has to see psychedelic policy or psychedelic progress in the same way. And early on, we cultivated a culture in our group. If you don't like it, you can start your own group. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to agree with me. I don't want people to agree with me.
You're
That's not
literally not on payroll.
right. Exactly. So it's like if you don't agree, go start your own group and advocate for psychedelics in your way. And so for us, we had to make these decisions because we had earned a reputation for excellence. The media would talk to us, right? We were the ones that led the campaign in the city. Frankly, a lot of the work fell on me. Life is a group project to some degree. There's people who build, there's people who participate. I like to actually break it down into a goose system. And this is useful when you're building a business, when you're building your professional network. Focus on the golden geese. There are some people that are going to go above and beyond. They're going to put in the work to help build with them, get their creative energy, work on a vision together. Then there's geese. Geese are amazing. they'll boost your posts, they'll talk about your work, they'll introduce you to people, they'll donate, they'll help support. But a goose is not a golden goose, and that's okay. Not everyone has to care about something at the same intensity that you do. If they care about something more intensely, the world is better off if they go out and put their efforts there. Then there's lazy gooses. Lazy gooses are, you ask them to bring chips to the party, they'll let you down once in a while. They're not bringing those chips, even though they said they would. You don't get mad at them. You don't push them out of your thing or your project. You just acknowledge that this person has a lower dedication to what you care about or your project. You don't have to cut ties with them. They'll still invite people to your events. They'll care about your message. They're lazy goose. It's okay. You don't tell them they're a lazy goose either. I guess. And then there's evil gooses, right? The evil gooses, they wear a top hat, they have a mustache, but in reality, they look like anybody, but they're really narcissistic people who will actually destroy a project and drag you down and insult you and make any group or thing they're a part of super toxic. So if you ever go into advocacy on name your issue, there's a lot of evil gooses who are not actually there to make anything better or change anything. They're just very narcissistic. They want a title. They'll say or do anything to just mess up other people's energy. And what you do then is you part ways with them. You just part ways peacefully. They can go do their own thing. And so this is the kind of advocacy philosophy I picked up over 5 years, is that our vision is basically educate on psychedelics, educate. Email your lawmakers, be in conversation with them, but a piece of paper is not the victory. A cultural shift is the victory. And, just be interested more than just psychedelics too. We have a lot of cool entrepreneurs who care about mycology, foraging, diversify, bring in new types of people, keep it fresh. And so far, that's been a model that's been really positive and fun. I love it, or I wouldn't still be doing it. I love going out in nature and teaching people about mushrooms and trees. And I like mentoring people in psychedelics. They've helped me a lot. So if that weren't true, I wouldn't be doing this. I would have walked away from this a long time ago. But I have a lot of fun with it. And I really love people. You got to love people to want to do something like this at all. And, you just got to read your energy level. And if someone is trying to make a bunch of money off of people or lie to you, just listen to your gut and just don't work with them. You don't have to sacrifice all your energy opposing them, blah, blah, blah. They're usually not effective or very organized. They're group thinking. They only think that victory is through the FDA. They only think that victory is through a ballot question, yada, yada, yada. The real victory is just people persuading people.
In my head, I was like, oh, you're looking to make $1 million? Oops, a hero's dose. My bad. Find out what $1 million feels like.
Oh, beautifully said, brother. Well, hey, as we wrap here, I mean, I feel like there's so many more topics and things we can touch on, but to respect your time and just see what's coming up for you. I mean, is there anything that's pressing that we didn't have a chance to cover or put our thumb on that you want to touch?
We want to create an X Prize. So I'm still putting together the details on this with some buddies. But we have tremendous resources with the nonprofit now. We've gotten a lot of donations, and we want to put that to accelerate the work, as you said, Dylan. And so a bunch of people cut down their trees because tree roots violate the foundations of homes and break them apart, or will break apart sidewalks or cause damage to water lines. The tree roots are actually trying to break the water lines because there's lower pressure there, and we have smashed our soil in so much in cities that that's the only place the tree roots can go. And so mycelium, that organism underground that fruits mushrooms, that connects forests, we can already make it into mycocrete. We're already making insulation that sequesters carbon after installation. That's hempcrete. We have these amazing natural materials, and if we get this technology to market, if we educate people about it, maybe we could be living in mushroom houses someday. We could be living in homes that are almost just designed for nature by nature. Maybe you grow mushrooms in your kitchen right out of your wall or something crazy like that. And so we just want to get people's creative ideas flowing, and we want to give them some startup grants to get them going on that project, based on this philosophy of, well, if you just get people talking, you get people innovating, that'll lead to something cool. So I think that I'm really excited to see how we can accelerate that work with the nonprofit donations. So if people want to support our work, if they want to grow kit, if they want to start growing mushrooms or learn more about it, look us up, Bay Staters for Creative Wellbeing. We're in Massachusetts, but we're happy to help you host and get an event started in your neck of the woods. If you're in Canada, Manitoba, Europe, wherever you are, we're excited to help promote a get together, because if you get the right people in a room talking, magical things happen.
Absolutely. Well, I was just trying to think of the quote. I had a total brain fart. What is it? It only takes a couple of people, 4 people or something. Whatever. A couple people can change the world. And hey, if you guys want to connect with James and that organization, but we can't say it enough. I mean, the reason we had you back on is because we love what you're doing. We love the content you put out, and everything you stand for. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you know someone that might be interested in hearing this message or joining this movement, feel free to send it to them, and like and subscribe to us. We'll have more people on like this if you're into it. If not, you can start your own podcast too. All right. Well, hey, we love you guys.